Let me share with you one interesting aptitude test question. Which of the following figures comes next in the sequence? And you're presented with 3 visible figures and the fourth figure that you need to figure out. You have 4 different choices. Choices A, B, C, and D to choose from. Do you think you know the answer? Give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to look at this question and see if you can come up with the answer. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution together. This question is very tricky, but it is also very interesting. And once you know the answer, it doesn't seem that tricky at all. Let's look at the 2 patterns present in this question. There is a pattern of lines separating the top part of the square and then the bottom part of the square. And what you see here is that the white line in the middle of the square is followed by the gray line, and then the white line, and then the gray line again. So that's the first pattern. And then there's also patterns of shapes repeating in the different order from top section in the bottom section. For example, if you look at the first triangle here in the first square, it is repeated in the second square in the bottom part, right below the gray line. And then if you can trace the figures, the second shape is repeated here as well. So they go in the reverse order. So to find the correct answer here, you need to look for the shape with the gray line that have top line shapes in the top part of the square 3, repeated in the reverse order in the bottom part of the shape 4. Hopefully you've nailed this question, and the correct answer here is choice D. And I truly hope that now you know how to answer similar problems on the test. Let me share with you an interesting and tricky question that tests your pattern recognitions and logical reasoning skills. If you look at the screen, please try to identify the square that doesn't belong to the group. You're presented with 4 different squares, and each square contains different objects inside. Please give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the answer. Do you see the answer? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution together. My advice to you, always look for patterns. And in this particular case, the pattern is that all figures are symmetrical. If you do a line from top to the bottom of the figure A, B, and D, you see that those figures are symmetrical because the left side of the figure is equivalent of the right side of the figure. But if you look at the figure C, you see substantial difference. And difference here is highlighted in circles. So the correct answer here is choice C. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Here's the tricky question from the real test. At first, answer seems obvious, but it may not be what you think. Which of the following is different from the others? And you're presented with 4 different choices: A, B, C, and D. Try to see if you can come up with the answer on your own. We'll reveal solution in a second. Maybe give yourself 10 to 15 seconds, pause this video, and see if you can come up with the answer. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue and reveal and get to the correct answer together. My advice to you is always the same. Always look for patterns. In this case, the pattern is quarters. Quarters inside the circles. As you can see, choices A, C, and D do have quarters inside the circle in different ways. But the choice B does not have any quarters. So that is the correct answer here for this particular question. Hopefully you've nailed it, but in case you need more questions or practice problems, please make sure to check out my ebook in the description section of this video. And now, here's the question from the test you can try to solve on your own. I have full confidence, though, that you can solve this challenge and find out the answer. Which of the following figures comes next in the sequence? You're presented with the line of figures, groups of 3 squares, grouped in sections 1, 2, and 3. In the section 3, 2 squares are missing, and this is something that you would need to determine out of the 4 presented choices: A, B, C, and D. Do you see the answer? Maybe give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the answer on your own. Did you figure out the solution? If you figured out the answer, feel free to post it in the comment section of this video and I'll give you my feedback. Make sure to post your rationale as well. This would allow me to comment on how well you solved this challenge and whether your rationale determines correct patterns presented in the question. I'm also planning to post a detailed answer to this question in my future videos, so make sure to subscribe and review my latest videos on the topic to learn about the answer and how to come up with the answers to similar questions on the test. Thanks for participating in this challenge, and good luck solving it. Here's the tricky question we frequently see on the test. Which of the following does not belong to the group? And you're presented with 4 different shapes, which represent 4 different choices: A, B, C, and D. Do you see the answer? Please take a look carefully. Maybe give yourself 10 to 15 seconds, possibly pausing this video to see if you can come up with the answer on your own. Do you see the answer? Let's continue and reveal the answer together. Simple advice to you, always look for patterns. All figures here are considered asymmetrical. Look for figure A. The part on the left of the line and then the part on the right of the line are different. Same thing is true for figures C and D. So figures A, C, and D are asymmetrical. So the correct choice here is choice B, which is heart, because heart is symmetrical. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Alright, this question is quite tricky, but regardless of whether you can solve it or not, once I show you the solution, I'm pretty sure you will be excited. Which of the following squares is different from the others? And you're presented with 4 different choices. Each square contains 9 small squares inside. Choices A, B, C, and D. Do you see patterns? Would you like to try to solve this question on your own? Give yourself maybe 10 to 15 seconds. Go closely with each square and look if you see any patterns. Did you figure out the answer? Let's continue to see how we can solve and get to the correct answer together. Sometimes I feel that I shouldn't reveal the answers to some of the questions. It's like a magician. Once you reveal the answer, you always remove the magic from the question. As usual, with any question, you always look for patterns. This would allow you to detect it on your own in the future questions. In this particular case, you see that we have a V pattern, and choices A, B, and C all have V patterns in the different dimensions. And choice D, in this case, does not have a V pattern. Maybe you can imagine some letter, maybe in another alphabet, but I don't see anything in English that you can imagine here. So the correct answer here is choice D. Let's recap. Always look for patterns. All squares show a V shape, with the exception of one. And figure D shows reverted L shape, which is not similar with the others. So the correct answer here is choice D. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Let's look at the very interesting question you frequently see on the test. Which of the following figures comes next in the sequence? You're presented with the 3 figures, and you need to figure out which one would be the 4th one. You have 4 different choices to select from. Consider this. There are 2 different types of rectangles presented in the question, as well as 4 different choices for the circles. Do you think you see the answer? Please take a look carefully and give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the right solution. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue to see how we can get to the correct solution and solve this challenge together. It is a very interesting question, isn't it? What you see here is 2 different types of patterns. You see that there are 2 different types of rectangles here, a large rectangle as well as the small rectangle. You see that the large rectangle is always followed by the small rectangle, and then another large rectangle. Large rectangle always contains 4 circles, and each circle is of the different type. Small rectangle only contains 2 different circles. As soon as you detect these 2 different patterns, you can solve this question and come up to the correct answer, which is A. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Let's look at the interesting question which tests your pattern recognition and analytical skills. Which of the following squares is different from the others? And you're presented with 4 squares, each square containing 9 small squares inside of the different colors. You have 4 different choices to choose from: A, B, C, and D. All look kind of similar, but one of them is substantially different. Do you see the answer? Now might be a good time to pause this video to see if you can come up with the answer on your own. Did you find the solution? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution and explanation together. My recommendation to you is always look for patterns. All squares here depict a T pattern, except for one. You see that the square A has yellow T pattern, square C has purple T pattern, and square D has dark blue T pattern. If we look back, square B does not have any T patterns. So this square is substantially different from the others. Let's recap. Always look for patterns. All squares in this question depict the T pattern, except for one. Figure B does not have a T pattern, and this is the correct answer for this question. Hopefully you've nailed it and now know how to answer similar problems in the test. Let's look at the interesting question which tests your pattern recognition skills. The following items have similarities with each other. Which item does not belong to the group? You're presented with 4 different choices. Each choice has 2 shapes inside. Choices A, B, C, and D. Do you see the items that might be different from the others? Spend some time, possibly 10 to 15 seconds, to think about it. Maybe pause this video to see if you can come up with the solution on your own. Did you figure out the answer? Let's continue to see how we can solve and get to the correct solution together. As usual, my advice to you, always look for patterns. And the pattern here is number of corners. Each particular shape has certain number of corners. For example, let's look at the star. Star has 5 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this shape only has 4 corners. So the similarity here between choices A, B, and C is the fact that each shape inside the rounded square has different number of corners. Star has 5, this shape has 4. This shape has 5, this shape has 6. This shape has 8, and this one has 7. But the correct answer here is choice D, because in this case, these 2 shapes have the same number of corners. So let's recap. Always look for patterns. In this case, the figures have similarities with each other. Each figure contains shapes that have corners that can be counted consecutively, and figure D have shapes that have the same number of corners. So the correct answer here is choice D, because the choice D's shape have the same number of corners. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test, or maybe you've even came to the correct answer on your own. Keep in mind, and that's what's interesting, the arrow here is not really a shape. One of the solutions that you might have gotten is that this is different because arrow is very different from the shapes and may not be considered a shape at all. So, a lot of leads to the right questions. Hopefully you've nailed this one and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Let me share with you an interesting and very tricky question you frequently see on the test. Which of the following figures comes next in the sequence? And you're presented with 4 different figures. You're presented with the square, which has large circle inside and also has small circles inside. Large square is also broken down into 8 sections, and small squares are located in the different sections of the large square. 3 of the objects in the sequence already pre-positioned, but 4th object, which is actually number 3 in the sequence, is missing. And you need to select that object out of 4 different choices. Choices A, B, C, and D. Do you see the answer? Now might be a good time to pause this video to give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the answer. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution together. My recommendation is always look for patterns. And in this particular case, you can track at least two different patterns. First of all, a large circle only has two different types of small circles inside. In addition to this, you see that there is only a particular number of small circles that are available. And the number of these small circles is always 4. This is why the correct choice here is choice B. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Let's look at the simple, but at the same time interesting and tricky question, which tests your knowledge of pattern recognitions. Determine which shape is different from the others. You're presented with 4 different shapes. Choices A, B, C, and D. Take a closer look to see if you can come up with the answer on your own. Do you see the answer? Now might be a good time to pause this video to give yourself at least 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the solution. Do you recognize the pattern? Let's continue to see if we can get to the correct solution together. Let me explain to you how to come up with the solution in this particular case. Always look for patterns. And the pattern specific to this particular question is number of corners in the shapes. If you look closely, 3 choices have even numbers of corners except for 1. Choices B, C, and D have 6, 10, and 8 corners respectively. And choice A only has 5 corners. Hopefully you selected choice A when you looked at the question originally. But in case you need more practice problems, please make sure to check out my ebook in the description section of this video. Let's look at the interesting question, which was designed to mislead you. Which of the following is different from the others? And you're presented with 4 different shapes. Choices A, B, C, and D. Do you see the answer? Please take a closer look, maybe pause this video to see if you can come up with the answer on your own. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue to see how we can get to the correct solution together. As usual, always look for patterns and commonalities in between shapes. In this case, choices A, B, and C, they all have the right angle, and right angle here is highlighted. What's interesting here is choice C was designed to mislead you because choice C has a cut corner. But the correct answer for this question is choice D. Let's recap. Always look for patterns. All shapes here have the right angle except for 1, and pentagon does not have the right angle. That's why you should select choice D, which is the pentagon. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. And now here's the question for you to try. Please pause this video and read the passage on the left. After you read the passage, here's the question. In the context of the passage, the underlined word drastic most nearly means, and you have 4 different choices. Choice A, durable. Choice B, confusing. Choice C, extreme. Or choice D, stable. If you feel that you know the answer, please post it in the comment section of this video. I will share with you my feedback shortly. I'm also planning to post a detailed answer in my future videos, so make sure to subscribe and review my latest videos on the topic to learn about the answer and how you can come up with the answer for the similar questions on the test. Thanks for participating and good luck. Let me share with you an interesting questions which test your knowledge of pattern recognitions and logical skills. Which of the following figures comes next in the sequence? And you're presented with the 3 sets of figures. Each set contains different shapes inside. And you're also presented with 4 different choices. Choices A, B, C, and D. Do you see the answer? Now might be a good time to pause this video for 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can recognize the answer. Did you find the answer? Let's continue to see how we can get to the correct solution and learn how to solve these types of problems together. My recommendation to you, always look for patterns. And there are multiple different patterns, in fact, 5 different patterns present in this question. Let's look at each one of the patterns. First of all, let's look at the sets. We have 3 sets, and each set contains 3 squares with shapes inside. And there are 5 different patterns. So let's look at the first pattern. The first pattern is the fact that single white shape and single black shape and a combination of 2 is always present in the set. Then there is a second pattern. There is always a solo shape. The black solo shape is always positioned in the left part of the square inside the set. The white shape is always positioned on the right part of the square inside the set. And the 2 set grouping with black and white shapes is always in the middle. Once you recognize all these patterns, you can quickly find the answer. An answer will have to have the black circle located on the right part of the square, as well as combination of white and black circles located in the middle of the square. Hopefully you nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Some of you might find this question tricky, but regardless of whether you can solve it or not on your own, you will be excited to learn the solution to this real-life assessment test question. Here's the question. Determine which object is missing in the sequence. And you're presented with the sequence of 5 objects, and object number 4 is missing. You also have 4 different choices to choose from for the missing object. Choices A, B, C, and D. Each object contains triangles as well as stars. Do you recognize the pattern? Do you see the answer? Give yourself 10 to 15 seconds, maybe pause this video to see if you can come up with the solution on your own. Did you figure out the answer? Let's continue to see how we can solve and get to the correct solution together. I'm probably going to repeat myself again, but my advice to you is always look for patterns. So there are 2 patterns present here, and both patterns have number of objects. The first pattern is pattern of number of stars in the box. You see that the first box has 3 stars, then it goes down to 2 stars, then 3 stars again, 2, so the next one is 3 again. So the missing object will definitely have 2 stars. There is also a pattern of decreasing triangles, and you see that the number of triangles is decreasing in every square in sequence after being shown twice. For example, object number 1 has 3 triangles. Object number 2 also has 3 triangles. Next object has 2 triangles. So following this pattern, the missing object will also have 2 triangles, and then the last one will have 1 triangle. This is why the missing square contains only 2 stars and 2 triangles in no specific position. So the correct answer here is choice D. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Let me share with you a tricky question from the test. I have confidence, though, that you might figure out the answer. Here's the question. Which of the following figures comes next in this sequence? And you're presented with the sequence of 5 figures, and figure number 5 is missing. You have 4 different choices to choose from. Choices A, B, C, and D. Do you see the answer? Give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the solution on your own. Did you figure out the answer? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution together. As you're probably well aware, there is always a solution to any challenge. And to figure out the solution for this particular problem, you need to look for patterns. There are 3 patterns present here in this particular question. Pattern number 1 is that smaller inside square is only present in every other box. So if you look at the squares 1, 3, and 5, they do not have the smaller inside box, and squares 2 and 4 do have it. There is a second pattern here as well. The color of the bigger square depends on the color of the smaller inside square present in the previous figure. So even though there is no small square in the figure number 1, you can take an imaginary square, and this is what will drive the color of the square number 2. Then there is a small square in the figure number 2, and you take the black color of this square, and this is what will drive the color of the square 3, and so on and so forth. The pattern number 3 is the pattern of straight lines, and you see that on the background there is a straight line here, and the straight line is present in every figure. If you look closely, you will see that the straight line rotates clockwise. So, based on this information, you can see that the next square should only contain solid blue square without inside square and straight line following the sequence. This leads us to correct answer for this particular question, being the choice A. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. Here is the question for you to try to solve on your own. I have confidence that you can answer this question correctly. Please read the passage on the left. You can pause this video to read the passage. And here's the question. In the context of the passage, the underlined word plethora most nearly means choice A, an important aspect, choice B, a lack of, choice C, a computer hard drive, and choice D, a great amount. Do you think you know the answer? If you know the answer, please post it in the comment section of this video. And I'll share with you my feedback shortly. Thanks for participating and good luck! Let me share with you an interesting and tricky question which tests your pattern recognitions and logical reasoning skills. In the question, you're presented with the three groups of shapes. The middle group has two shapes missing. All other groups have pentagon shapes present. You have four different options to select the correct choice for the missing shapes. Choices A, B, C, and D. Give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the answer. Do you see the answer? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution together. To solve this challenge, you need to understand patterns present in this question. There are two main patterns presented. The first pattern is the fact that pentagon contains the circle in the middle. And the second fact is that two other pentagons in the group contain circles outside of the pentagon. So to determine the correct answer, you need to look at the pentagon already present in the question. You see that the pentagon already present in the question has the circle outside of the pentagon, which means that the correct choice to answer this question would be two pentagons, one pentagon with the circle outside and another pentagon with the circle inside. Let's recap. Always look for patterns. And there are two patterns present in this question. Pattern 1 is the fact that there is always a circle inside the pentagon. And pattern 2 is the fact that there are always two shapes with the circle outside of the pentagon. So the correct choice here is choice B. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar questions on the test. Here is a very tricky question which is very unusual from the others. But once you know the pattern, it is very easy to solve it. Here is the question. Which of the following comes next in the sequence? You're presented with the sequence of 4 items, and you need to determine the arrow's location for the item number 4. You have 4 different choices: A, B, C, and D. Do you see the answer? Answer is not obvious, let me tell you, but always look for patterns. Once you determine the pattern here, this question is very easy to answer. Give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can come up with the answer. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution together. As I mentioned, always look for patterns. And the pattern here is triangles rotation. If we rotate triangles from the sandbox and we rotate them 180 degrees, we'll get to the square. And that's exactly what's happening between shape number 1 and shape number 2. And this diagram below explains what's happening. Once you figure out the pattern, you know exactly how to calculate the location of the arrow in the shape number 4. Let's recap. Always look for patterns. Patterns presented in this question consists of 2 items. Triangles from the sand clock rotate 180 degrees to the next shape. And position of the arrow is determined based on the rotation. This is why the next shape will be the one with the arrow pointing at the same corner as it was before the rotation. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know what to look for on the real test. Here's the question from the test, but somehow I have a feeling that you might come up with the answer. Which of the following comes next in the sequence? And you have a sequence of 4 shapes. The third shape is missing, and you need to select the right shape out of 4 choices at the bottom. Choices A, B, C, and D. Do you see the right answer? Please take a careful look to see if you can come up with the solution. Give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you will get to the right answer. Do you see the answer? Let's continue to see how we can solve this challenge and get to the correct solution together. As usual, answer might be a lot simpler than you think. But the key is to always look for patterns. So take a look at the patterns here with the shapes. The first shape, arrow, points to 12 o'clock. Second shape points to 3 o'clock. You see that it clicked 2 positions between the first shape and the second shape. Then the next shape, arrow, supposedly will point to 6 o'clock because the last one points to 9 o'clock. So that's the answer. You go 2 corners at a time and you calculate the next move using the formula. So the correct answer is choice D, arrow pointing to 6 o'clock. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar problems on the test. And now here's the question for you to try. On Sunday, Greg left his house at 6 p.m. and traveled a certain distance before arriving at his desired destination at 1 p.m. the following day. Assuming that his home and destination are in the same time zone and that over the course of his entire trip he drove at an average speed of 38 miles per hour, how many miles did he travel to get to his desired destination? And you have 4 choices to choose from. Choice A, 722. Choice B, 747. Choice C, 801. And choice D, 837. Do you think you know the answer? If you know the answer, please make sure to post it in the comment section of this video so I can give you my feedback. Thanks for participating and good luck! Let me share with you a tricky question which tests your pattern recognitions and logical reasoning skills. You're presented with a rectangle, which inside of it contains 6 different shapes, and one of the shapes is missing. You need to determine which shapes completes the figure, and you're presented with 4 different choices. Choices A, B, C, and D. All of these choices look very similar. Now is the good time to pause this video to see if you can come up with the answer on your own. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue to see how we can get to the correct solution together. As usual, my recommendation to you is always look for patterns. And there are 2 different patterns presented here in this particular question. Let's look at the pattern 1. Pattern 1 defines that the shapes go in the horizontal rows. For example, this is the shape 1, this is the shape 2, and this is the shape 3. I grouped them as shape 1.1, meaning that the first one represents the first row, shape 1. The next shape is first row, shape 2, and the third shape is the first row, shape 3. Similar pattern will exist for the bottom row. Now let's look at the pattern 2. And pattern 2 represents 90-degree clockwise outside shape rotation around the circle in the middle. As you can see, there is always a circle in the middle, and the outside shapes rotate around this circle. So let's follow the triangle. Let's look at the first shape. Here, triangle points to the top. In the next shape, triangle rotates 90-degree clockwise and points to the right. In the following shape, triangle rotates another 90 degrees and follows to the bottom. A very similar pattern will exist here in the bottom row. Therefore, the missing part of the figure contains the shapes that rotate 90 degrees to the right. So the correct answer here is choice C. Let's recap. There are 2 patterns here in this question. The first pattern is the fact that each row represents a horizontal set of shapes which rotates as sequential number of shapes increases. And the second pattern indicates that the shapes rotate clockwise around the circle in the middle. Therefore, the correct answer here is choice C. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar questions on the test. Let me share with you a tricky question from the test which validates your knowledge of pattern recognitions and logical reasoning. Which of the following comes next in the sequence? And you're presented with 4 squares. The fourth square has a question mark, which means that you need to figure it out. And you have four different choices. Choice A, B, C, and D. An answer is not obvious, but I'm pretty sure you will figure it out. Please give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to see if you can see the answer, or maybe you can come up to the answer. Did you figure out the solution? Let's continue to see how we can get to the correct solution together. And here's the answer. The fourth box in the sequence is now populated. But let's go through the logic and rationale so you would know how to answer similar questions in a test. Number one tip, and always a tip, is always look for patterns. So what you see is that the figure inside rotates clockwise. If you look at the corner of the shape, you will see that the corner was on a particular side of the square. It was on the left side. Now the same corner touches the top line of the square. And then in the third box, it touches the right line of the square. Which means that you can logically assume that in the fourth box, it will be touching the bottom line. There is also a pattern of arrows. You see that the box number 2 has the arrow pointing to the right. And boxes 1 and 3 do not have this arrow. So the arrow only present in the second box. In the original question, arrow is only present in the second box. We can logically assume that it only placed in the boxes that are even. Number 4 box is missing, so you can logically assume that the arrow should be present in the box number 4. Among the choices presented, only choice C and D are valid because only they contain the arrow. And you need to determine the final box based on the position of the shape inside the square. So the correct answer here is choice C. Hopefully you've nailed this question and now know how to answer similar questions in the test. Thanks for watching. Please check out our free and premium resources on our website, howtoanalyzedata.net. Also, please make sure to check out available downloads specific to this video in the description section. Also, please consider following online training for everyone. We have a great community of dedicated followers here on this channel to help you learn technology, pass the interview and assessment test. Also, please share this video with others who you think might benefit from the content. Leave questions, comments, or suggestions in the description section of this video. And all the best on your interview and assessment test. Thanks for watching.